So, one of the topics that has come up so many times over the last decade is how do I do DevOps for COTS applications, such as SAP or Siebel or Salesforce, Workday, NetSuite, ServiceNow, and so forth. Various people have come up with answers to this question, but they all seemed rather unsatisfactory to me. That is, until Andrew Davis, Senior Director of Research and Innovation at Copado, gave a talk called DevOps and Salesforce, which makes sense because he's author of a book called Mastering Salesforce and DevOps. And the insight he gave seemed universal to all of these applications that I had mentioned above. Well, not really. He had to explain it to me a couple times before I finally got it. This seems like a problem that almost every large enterprise faces, and how you think about these applications will limit the impact you can have. For that reason, I am so delighted that Andrew will teach us about DevOps for low-code platforms, why this is important and why it's on the rise, and what makes those applications uniquely challenging and what we can do about it.
Hello and welcome to DevOps for Low Code. I'm Andrew Davis. I'm the Senior Director of Research and Innovation at Copado, also author of the book Mastering Salesforce DevOps. So first of all, I want to establish what is low code again. So low code is application development using visual or declarative techniques instead of code. And just to make sure we're all on the same page about that, first of all, I think we all know what infrastructure is. We all understand what code is. So low code are systems that enable you to create a user interface like you see in the upper right, or create a flow of logic, business process logic like you see in the lower right, using visual or declarative elements. Now, when we're talking about DevOps for infrastructure, we're talking about all these cloud platforms, AWS, GCP, technologies like Kubernetes and so forth. When we're talking about DevOps for code, we're typically talking about build pipelines and CI/CD and build scripts and so forth. What are we talking about when we're talking about DevOps for low code? That's what I'm going to cover today. So first of all, we need to understand a little bit more about low code, because there's actually low code platforms can come from two very different sources. The first is as a way of simplifying code-based systems. And the second is as a way of making commercial apps more flexible. They're a little bit different, two very different streams. So the first one, simplifying code-based development, this is equivalent to moving up through these levels of abstraction. They say the whole history of computer science is all about increasing levels of abstraction, from machine language to assembly language to higher level languages to low code. And so you have a bunch of low code systems. There's something like 200 different low code systems that are all allowing developers to build applications with visual declarative elements instead of having to write code, so to speak, on the command line. What are the benefits? With each level of abstraction you're moving up, you get greater simplicity, which means that the systems that you're building at each of these higher levels of abstraction, they're easier to maintain, but they also have coarser granularity. You're dealing with bigger chunks of things, bigger components. And there's a couple of downsides, means you get less flexibility as you move up through the stack, and potentially less speed as well. Now, the other very different approach, different direction in which low code arises is in the direction of making commercial applications more flexible. So the first thing you can do to take a commercial application and make it your own is to put your own data in there. And then all of a sudden it's yours. You've personalized it. The second thing you can do is change configuration. But we know that humans have infinite desires and infinite different interests, and there's no amount of configuration that can address them all. So at some point, these commercial applications need to develop like no-code ways of customizing the application if they want to meet the diverse needs of their customers and potential customers. And at some point, they may even need to enable code to be written on their platform. So if we look at some of these big commercial applications like ServiceNow, Workday, Salesforce, SAP, and there's many, many more, they've all enabled increasing levels of flexibility and configurability on their platforms. Why? Greater flexibility means that they can meet more needs for more potential customers. And it also enables them to make changes, fine-grained controls and changes to an application rather than expecting all of a company's thousands or tens of thousands of users to change their behavior. So some of these small tweaks really aid a lot in the adoption for the applications. With anything, there's trade-offs. Now, when you move from a pre-built, pre-packaged application to something that's heavily customized, there is more work required to set it up and get it running, and it's more complicated. But one way or another, these two trends have converged. This trend of simplifying code-based systems, which may be something you run on-premise or in a cloud-agnostic way, and this idea of making commercial apps more flexible, they both converge in this idea of low-code systems. So just to clarify up front. Now, low-code systems are very much on the rise, to the extent that Gartner is predicting that by 2025, the majority, about 70% of new applications developed in enterprises will be based on these low-code or no-code platforms. And that at least half of them are going to be from outside of traditional IT organizations. They'll be coming from marketing departments, finance departments, customer support departments, and so forth. So Gartner and Forrester, for many years, they've been studying these low-code platforms, ranking them, rating them, very fast evolving space. Now, Salesforce is sometimes called the OG of the low-code world. Its origins started enabling code in the platform in 2008. And so if you really want to understand Salesforce, though, you really need to transport yourself into their world, because Salesforce has a very different world and very different culture. Not only do they host some of the world's biggest technology conferences, they have some of the world's densest population of stuffed furry characters at these tech conferences. You won't find stuffed furry characters like this at the DevOps Enterprise Summit or most other tech conferences, because Salesforce is really trying to connect with a very different audience. The talent pool in Salesforce looks very different from the talent pool of traditional applications